Good afternoon, Suneeti ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. We shall be starting at 3:05.
Good afternoon.
Just 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Pratishtha.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. I, Pratishtha Vasti, on behalf of Sakri Council of India, welcome you all to this third session of C 2.0 webinar series. For today's for today's session is divided into two slots. First is from 3 to 4 p.m. and second slot is from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. Attendance in both the slots is compulsory for the students for the final assessment. Today, for the first session, we are joined by Ms. Suneeti Toteja. She is Scientist E and Head of Food and Agriculture Department of Bureau of Indian Standards. We welcome you, ma'am. Now, I request Abhishek sir to address audience and give a welcome note to Suneeti ma'am. Over to you, Abhishek sir.
Uh, Very good afternoon to all the students for C 2.0 as and Sunidhi ma'am, good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good
Ma'am,
afternoon.
thank you so much for coming on this session. It is our pleasure that you are
Thank
here
you.
today and enlightening all these students basically who are just going to be out now with their they have already passed on the entire 3 year 4 year program, and now they will be out, and probably this particular program is, ma'am, we have actually developed around IRCTC because we wanted to know the student we wanted students to know about how IRCTC operates basically. So today, probably in the coming few minutes, I think Mr. Anand Jha is also going to join. He's the PRO, GGM for IRCTC, and probably this particular program we also wanted somebody like you sitting on a very prominent seat to actually come and address the students, tell them about the certification, how BIS works basically, how these certification works, and why they are so important. And in the coming time, because the retail is growing, we are going into the next level of retail and exports. So I think this is going to be a big eye opener for them, all the students. You are really lucky that ma'am has come over today, and she is giving a small lecture to you. And over to you, ma'am. I would not waste a lot of time.
No,
Thank you
no.
so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I think thank you for giving this opportunity to BIS. I just wanted to confirm, I hope I'm audible. Yes.
Yes, ma'am, you are well audible.
Okay, thank you. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you, Pratishtha, and thank you, Abhishek ji. I think it's good that I mean, given BIS the opportunity, and I think we are hoping that we will work together. Just wanted to have an idea. The college students that they are what? They are catering college students or food tech students? Like just to have an idea before I make a presentation.
Ma'am, they are mixed batch. The students has a background on food tech also and catering also, IGMs and food tech both, BTech food tech.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is that I'll just start my presentation. I'll just share the presentation, and I think start from there. Just a second. I hope my presentation is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just put it in slideshow mode. Yeah. Good. So just a second. Yeah. So I would be talking of see, my department is the Food and Agriculture Department, and I'm from Bureau of Indian Standards. So I'm basically looking after the national standards, as I think many of you may be aware, it is the IS codes that we call them. So IS is Indian Standard Codes. So this department, which is the FAD department, which is Food and Agriculture Department, it formulates national standards in the area of food, feed, agriculture, and all related disciplines. So just to start, so that you must be aware, first is that what is BIS? That is, BIS is Bureau of Indian Standards, and it started as ISI initially in 1947. In fact, it was even before our country attained its independence. This Indian Standards Institution was established, and in January 1947. So primarily as ISI, which is our the erstwhile organization, was primarily involved in standardization and quality control. And then it was through an act of parliament in 1986, we call it as the Bureau of Indian Standards Act, that from ISI we became BIS. So it, this gave us a statutory status to BIS. In fact, it enhanced our status, So from 1947, then we became Bureau of Indian Standards in 1986. And then later on, to give us even more powers and to establish BIS as the national standards body. Why this was important was that there were a number of other organizations, which were making standards, but they could be sector specific, not relating to, I mean, the entire sector or all the sectors of economy. So to give that importance and power to BIS, the status was given as a national standards body, and our act was also revised, and we had the new act, so we call it as the BIS Act 2016. And we work under this act, and later on, then in 2017-18, we had the BIS rules and the BIS regulations which came into being. So now BIS is called as the National Standards Body. So whatever standards that are made by BIS, they become national standards. So our IS codes, as we call them, they are actually national standards. Now, apart from standards, there are two main activities. Actually, there are three core activities. Standardization is, of course, the basis of both the other two activities. The second activity is certification, or what is nowadays it is called as conformity assessment. And the third is laboratory. While my presentation today, I would be focusing only on the standardization part, that is the kind of standards that BIS makes in the food and agriculture sector, and also how the standards are made and who makes the standards. So, or I would be covering that part, but maybe as yes, uh, I'm not able to hear. Can you repeat, please? Somebody, should I go on, Pratishtha?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I think somebody's mic is on. I'll just check.
So maybe can we request the participants to kindly mute themselves?
Students, kindly mute yourself. If somebody's mic is on, please check.
Pratishtha, I think Mr. Jha has
Anand,
joined up from IRCTC. Yeah, he's joined.
yes, yes, he's joined. I think his mic was on. Now it's on mute, ma'am. Ma'am, we can proceed. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
okay, thank you. Yeah, so today I would be speaking on standardization, but as I think Abhishek ji was also saying that they would also like to know about certification. So what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit of certification, but let me first go through my part of the presentation. And then I think once the students are aware of what standards are, then they'll be able to understand that how do we do certification. So I'll just move ahead. Now, it is very important, that of course in BIS we do recruit food scientists, we recruit medical professionals, we do recruit agricultural scientists, also graduates, agriculture engineering graduates. But it is not the BIS officials, which make standards. We actually coordinate the activity of standardization at the national level. So there is a structure of how standards are made in BIS, and that is the standardization structure. So at the top or at the apex level, which is you can see the first four committees or councils, they are actually more on the administrative and the advisory role, which is our governing council at the top, which is headed by the union minister of the department under which BIS functions. So we function under Department of Consumer Affairs. So the minister of who is looking after that department would be the president of that governing council. And then you have an executive committee which is chaired by the director general of BIS. Then you have a standards advisory committee which is also chaired by a DG BIS. And then we have division councils. So these division councils are sector specific division councils. So in the area of food and agriculture, we have one Food and Agriculture Division Council. So we call it as FADC. Similarly, for civil engineering, we have a civil engineering division council. For mechanical engineering, we'll have a mechanical engineering division. So our work actually, the technical work starts from division council and then down the line, which is sectional committees. So each division council, that is FADC, which is the Food and Agriculture Division Council, it has sectional committees. So like you could have a dairy committee, you could have a fruit and vegetable sectional committee, you could have even say a pesticide sectional committee, you could have a food safety sectional committee. So, and each of these sectional committees then, they make small subcommittees or panels to get their work done. And now it is important that is, that who are all members of these sectional committees. So these sectional committees are generally chaired by very eminent, you could say, scientists or technologists. By SC, it is the sectional committee. And we primarily, our BIS Act recognizes that each of these sectional committees must be represented by different stakeholders. Obviously, the most important stakeholder is the industry, because it is the industry which has to implement. So, the concerned industry, whether it is from the MSME sector and even the industry associations, consultancy organizations, they are one stakeholder. The other very important stakeholder is if in that sector there is a regulatory body or there is a concerned ministry. So government departments, ministries, they are the members of these committees, and technologists. By technologists, we mean any academic or research institutions, any other professional bodies, any R&D institutions, any organization which is involved in testing. So you could have laboratories also, and then as consumers also, which is an important stakeholder. So you have organized buyers, or you could say users of the standard, and also these civil society organization. And also the our rules, it says that we have to ensure, each sectional committee has to ensure that there's a balance of interest. So, as a guiding principle, in all our sectional committees, we ensure that the industry participation is restricted to not more than 1/3 of the total composition of the sectional committee. And each sectional committee generally has between 25 to 30 members. And the representation of the industry generally is not more than 1/3. Then how do the organizations represent, like in our food safety sectional committee, you could have, say, CFTRI, many of you would be knowing, or NIFTEM. It is a member of that committee. So each organization can nominate 3 members on that committee. The one is, first is the principal member, the second is the alternate member or representative, and in addition, if they feel, they can also nominate a young professional below the age of 37 years to represent that organization on the committee. Now, apart from that, sometimes, certain scientists or professionals, owing to their vast experience, even after superannuation from their organization, we also take them as in personal capacity. So we call them as individual members or experts. So that also is sometimes some committees, you will find that they would have 2 to 3 such people in individual capacity also. So as I had said, that standards are formulated through division councils, and Food and Agriculture Division Council is one of the 15 division councils in BIS. So this FADC is responsible for making standards in this area, and under FADC we have around 30 sector specific sectional committees. Now, I think this may be a little maybe too much for a first presentation, but this is, how standards are made. I will just briefly touch upon that. That sometimes, we receive a request from an individual organization, we can receive a request from ministry or a government, or we can receive a request from the industry that they would like some subject to be taken up for formulation of a national standard. And there is a performer for proposing the new subjects, and that is there on our portal also, and we've given you the link also. So the work starts, when we receive a new proposal for a standard. Then we also expect that the organization or the person who proposes the standard, the subject, should also give us some sort of a working draft. That is a working draft specification. Now, sometimes, the proposal that is given, it is very clear that this would fall in this sectional committee under the scope of that. So, it can go directly to the sectional committee, but sometimes, the scope of the subject is not clear. So generally the concerned division council, in our case it is the Food and Agriculture Division Council, then it will decide that which committee will take up this subject. And in case the division council feels that the justification for this subject is not it is not there, and it feels that it is not possible to make a standard on the subject, or it is not should not be made, then with the proper justification the division council may also reject, which rarely happens actually. And then after that, once the committee is assigned this work, the sectional committee is assigned this work, then the work starts with the preparation of a draft. In case a draft has been given to by the proposer, that draft is made, or then the sectional committee generally makes a small panel of experts from within their committee, maybe 4 to 5 people, and then they start making a working draft. And once they have made that working draft, then it is again put up to the sectional committee as a preliminary draft. Now, once the committee agrees that yes, now it is okay, I mean, it is, they kind of finalize it from their end, then it is sent into public for comments. And as per our act, we must give a commenting period of minimum 30 days. So it is available on our website. We send mails also, and it can also be accessed through our portal. So then it becomes a wide circulation where anybody can comment. It is not only the members of the committee, but anybody, any stakeholder can comment at this stage. Then whatever comments are received, then the comments are again to be discussed in that same committee which actually made the draft, and then it may agree on some comments, it may not agree on some comments, and then the final draft incorporating all the comments is then sent to the chairman of the division council for final adoption as an Indian standard. And then it goes into publication, there is editing, drafting, etc. happens, and then finally a standard is published. Now after a standard gets published, I think I will just leave this for you. After a standards is published, then it is also gazetted. So it is gazette notified in the Indian Gazette. And once it is gazette notified, then, it is called as an Indian standard. Now, it is very important for all of you to know that BIS, as the national standards body, it follows the internationally accepted principles of good standardization. And this is what is given under the WTO TBT Code of Good Practice for Preparation, Adoption and Application of Standards. So the guiding, as per WTO, the Code of Good Practice for Formulation of Standards, there are 6 main principles of how standards should be developed. First and foremost is transparency. That means all the experts who are making the standards, the composition of those, that committee which is making, that should be transparent. So on our website, the composition of all our committees is given. So we have a transparent system. And openness. So by openness, it is also meant, that we will not only give representation, say, to an industry which is a large scale, but our representation or committee, if somebody wants to become a member in our sectional committee, or they want to contribute in making standards, so we will give equal opportunity to all, whether it is a small scale sector, from MSME sector, or a large scale. So it is actually open to all organizations. And then you have is the impartiality and consensus. So how standards are made? Sometimes what happens, during the meetings of the committee, sometimes it so happens that, there may not be a consensus reached, There may be some members who may not be in agreement with the decisions of the committee, so they may have a different point of view. So it is, our committee structure is such that, through a process of consensus, only the standards are made. So there is no voting in the committees. It is only once all the committee members agree, Only then it moves forward to the next stage. So that is how consensus is achieved. And then of course importance is effectiveness and relevance. That is, if we take a lot of time in making standards, then the standards may lose their relevance. So it is very important that the standards that we make are relevant and at the same time they are timely. And coherence in terms of the language that is written, that is, whatever Indian standards are made, they must be easily understandable, they may be comprehensible, otherwise it will not make any sense. The other is the sixth dimension is the development dimension, and this does apply to developing countries like India, wherein during the process of standard development, while understanding that some of the maybe consumer organizations or maybe some of the industries may not have the wherewithal to actually participate or contribute in standard making, or even some of the research institutions, they may not have the budget and the funds to participate. So BIS does help that also in terms of funding their travel and stay for attending the committee meetings, doing the capacity building in terms of trainings and standardization, so that it helps them to reach the level of the other members of the committee. So then BIS is also a member of the International Organization of Standardization, which is ISO, and also IEC. Well, in relation to food and agriculture, it is more ISO. IEC is for the electrotechnical standards, so not much relevant for us. And so as a member of ISO, we do have some responsibilities and we also have some rights. So some of the rights that we have is that we participate in the standardization that is happening at the ISO level, and therefore we can also adopt the international standards as Indian standards. So you would have seen in some of our standards, it is written IS stroke ISO. So that means it is an Indian standard which has been adopted from an international standard. That is our right which we can do as a member of ISO. And so, as I had said, that one of the principle is relevance of the standard. So it is very important that we also fix timelines. So this happens is from the start of a subject which is approved by a committee and we have a working draft, our time starts from there. So generally we say if it is adoption of a standard, international standard, a total time of 6 months is given for standards development. Until you can say, I mean, each subject is categorized as a priority 1, a priority 2, or a normal priority standard. So if it is an indigenous standard, that is where we are starting from scratch, it is 0, then generally 24 months time is given for making of standards. Now, once the standards are made, it is important that a standard also should be reviewed by the committee. It is not only that the role of the committee is only to make new standards, but also the existing standards have to be continuously updated. So that is why we have standards which are to be reviewed. They can be reviewed because there could be an updation in the test methods. Maybe there's a change in technology and that has to be reflected in the standard, or some new type has come, or maybe the standard is now, you could say, it is obsolete, and so maybe it may require a withdrawal only, and then there could be change in the ingredients of those product that is used. So there could be so many reasons why a standard needs to be reviewed. Now, as per our rules, BIS rules, it is incumbent upon us that we must review the standard at least once in 5 years. So that is, you could say, our responsibility. So it is a responsibility of each sectional committee that they must review all the standards under their scope once in 5 years. But sometimes, because they receive comments from various stakeholders, or sometimes that they are aware that some change has taken place in regulations, etc., then the standard can be reviewed prior to 5 years also. Just to give you an example, that when I was talking about FADC, which is the Food and Agriculture Division Council, so what is the scope? That is, what kind of standards are made under FADC? So standards are made in the field of food, feed and agriculture produce, covering the food and the feed chain from primary production. So it will start from maybe the crop or the soil. So we have a committee on soil quality also till its final consumption, and retail, transport, everything gets covered. So in fact now even drinking water, packaged drinking water, and even now Ayush, which is the Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha and homeopathy, all of these are also covered under the scope of FADC. So just so that you have an idea, who is the chairperson of our division council is Dr. Trilochan Mahapatra. He is the secretary, Department of Agricultural Research and Education in Ministry of Agriculture. There are 30 sectional committees which are working under this, which I had already said, and we are having through these committees, we have around 800 experts who are associated with us. And the number of standards which have been published under FADC is around 2208. And in entire BIS, we have around 21,000 standards. So you could say that around 10 to 11% of the standards come under Food and Agriculture Division Council. And there are around 20 Indian standards. Out of these 2208, 20 Indian standards, they are under mandatory BIS certification. That means the industry have to compulsory follow that. And there is another 176 standards which are under voluntary certification. So that is the businesses or the industry is voluntarily taking up BIS certification because they see an edge if they have the BIS certification. And are currently licensees which are in operation under FADC is around 9200, which is 16% of the total BIS license. Now, as I had said that there are around 30 sectional committees under FADC. So just to have an idea of the sectional committees, I have also just given you the sectional committees and the current chairperson of these committees. Like for the pesticide sectional committee, we have Dr. Ravi Prakash, and he's the plant protection advisor to the government of India. Say for example, for soil quality, which I was saying, we have Dr. A.K. Singh, who retired as ex-VC of the Krishi Vishwavidhyalaya, Gwalior. And then you have spices, you have director research, spices board is the chairman. Similarly, like in the case of fisheries, we have DDG Fisheries ICR as the chairman. I'm just giving you an idea. So like you have the director of CFTRI, who's Dr. Sridevi Annapurna Singh. She's the chairperson of our Drinks and Drinking Water Committee. So you could see that all the sector, all the fields under FADC, they are included. On our agriculture side, like for the dairy products, we have Dr. M.S. Chauhan, who is the director of NDRI. So he is the chairperson. Then you have some of the newer committees are the ready to eat foods and specialized products, so that is FAD 24. Then you have the Ayurveda sectional committee, which is FAD 26. Now, the last two, you can say these are the new committees, which have been recently constituted under FADC in March of this year. And we are still constituted, the composition and the chairperson is still to be appointed. So we have not mentioned, we are still awaiting approval of that. So two new committees which are being constituted is the microbiology sectional committee and then the animal husbandry and equipment sectional committee. Now, it is also important, as students, that you should be aware of what are standards in terms of standards. By standards, we don't only mean the product standards, but there could be standards on test methods. So if you look at under FADC, 60% of our 2200 standards are actually product standards and 26% of the standards are test method standards. Then we also have codes of practice, like you could say codes of hygiene also, codes of safety, codes of practice for transportation and storage. They comprise 9% of our total standards. And the rest, you could have some terminology standards also. Standards on dimensions, system standards, safety standards, etc. Now, also to give you an idea of the work that is done, in the last year, 21-22. So 21-22 means that from April of last year till March of this year, we have 30 sectional committees, and the meetings of these sectional committees were 42. And if you combine that with the subcommittees and the panels, there were 116 meetings which were held. And then you have standards, how many standards which were sent for publication. There were 114, and issued for wide circulation were 125. So you could see the amount of work that is being done in the department. Then the number of standards formulated. So the new standards were 73. Revision, as I had said, we need to review our standards periodically. So 66 new standards got published, 66 revisions also got published. And out of our 2200 standards, there are 417 standards, which are based on the ISO standards. So they are completely harmonized with the ISO standards. Now, it's important for you to know that some of the important standards, Now, there are 3 standards on waters, and on packaged waters, we have 2 standards. One is the packaged drinking water, where, all sorts of filtrations and purification, disinfection, all type of water treatments are allowed, so that the final product is safe as per the requirements of the standard. So this standard 14543, it will prescribe the physical requirement, the physico-chemical requirements, also the upper limits for the contaminants, microbiological requirements. So the limits for pathogens, etc. are included. Then we have a standard on packaged natural mineral water. This is a water, where no treatment other than physical separation is allowed. So that means the water itself has to be naturally pure, and then it has to be packaged. And in fact, both these standards are under mandatory BIS certification. So what happens is, or you would have seen on any bottle of water, packaged drinking water or natural mineral water, you'll always find the ISI mark. The ISI mark is our certification mark. We call it as a standard mark, which signifies that it has been tested, and that means a BIS officer has gone there, they have inspected that premises, that factory, and then the product has also been tested as per these standards. And in fact, maybe next time, once you buy that water bottle, so once you see the ISI mark, you'll also find there would be the number of the Indian standard. So it will either be IS 14543, which would be written on the bottle, or IS 13428, depending on which water it is. And it will also have the license number of that that particular manufacturer. So we call it as a certification marks license. So it will be CM/L, that also you can see, and the IS number would be given. So this will be both there, where you have the ISI mark given on the bottle. The other standard, the third standard, is IS 10500. We call it as this is our path, so it's very commonly used. This is a drinking water. This is a standard for potable water. Now this is a standard which is used, by various municipal bodies when they supply the piped drinking water. So this kind of standard cannot be certified because it's not in a packaged form, but this is a standard which is referred and which is used by state governments, by municipal bodies, for basically ensuring the safety and the quality of water that they are that is being domestically used. So this is, and in fact, this standard itself is generally used in all our even the food industry, in all in wherever water has to be used, in the food industry, then it is always said that it must comply with the requirements of 10500. Now, simple standards, I'm starting with simple standards. So you will have also standards on salts. I mean, it looks as if it's very simple, but you have standards on the iodized salt, IS 7224, which is also under certification. Then IS 16232. So this is a double fortified salt. This is iron fortified with iodized salt. So you may be curious to know that in a standard what will there be, like for iron fortified iodized salt. So the standard will give, the composition of the salt in terms of what should be the purity. So it will give a requirement of how much should be the sodium chloride content. Then it will also give what should be the minimum amount of the iodine which should be there, minimum amount of iron that should be there, and if there are any impurities, then the upper limits of those impurities have to be also given. Then if it has to be packaged, what should be the quality of the package material that is used, and then comes the labeling. That means in the label, what all minimum information must be there on the label. So that is what all a standard contains. Similarly, you also have standards on additives. So as you all know that in the area of food, we have FSSAI, which is the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. That is the regulator in case of food. So what FSSAI does is it permits food additives, okay? That only these additives, food additives can be allowed in different kind of food matrices. So what we do in BIS is that whichever are the additives which are permitted, it is very important that those additives, the standards of their identity and standards of quality of those additives also needs to be specified, especially standards for food colors. So accordingly, we have a committee which is a food additives section committee. So it has made a number of Indian standards on various food additives. I have just highlighted some of them. So you have synthetic food color preparations and mixtures, IS 5346, then IS 2557, and then also on Hypromellose HPMC capsule shells. Now for sugar again, apart, although we do have standards on refined sugar, but the more important sugar, plantation white also. Similarly, on the grading of these sugars also we have standards, and also on the equipment part, the various equipments which are used in the sugar industry. Similarly, the code of practice for sugar go downs also. So all those standards are also there. Then in the area of coffee, tea, chocolates, we have a stimulant food sectional committee. So just to give you an idea of, you have standards on all these, on black tea, green tea, instant tea. Similarly, we have standards on fruit, vegetables also. So, although BIS does not formulate standards on the generally the fresh produce, which comes under egg mark, but we do make standards on the processed fruits and vegetables. So you will have standards for juices, standards for jam, jellies, marmalades, for pulps, for purees, etc. But we do have standards on dried fruits also, like walnuts and cashew, chilgoza, etc. Then in spices and condiments, in fact, in spices and condiments, so that you are also aware that apart from making Indian standards, we are also holding the secretariat at the ISO level. Since India is a major producer and exporter of spices, so since its inception, we are having the ISO Secretariat. So what we do is that we are responsible for making the international standards in the area of spices and condiments also. So we are making both national standards as well as ISO standards in spices. So you can see the standards that are there, that's on the screen. Then similarly in food grains also, we have standards on, say, fortified rice kernels. These are some of the newer ones. So I have tried to highlight some of the standards which have been recently published also on atta, besan, on pashtik atta, fortified rice. Then in dairy, of course, in dairy, we have, I think, standards on all the major milk products. But just to give you an idea that it is not only the milk products that we cover, but we also cover sometimes, the related machineries and equipment. So you have bulk milk coolers. So specification for bulk milk coolers, then specification for the milk cans, stainless steel milk cans is also there. Then a basic standard like pasteurized milk, that standard is also there. Standard on UHT sterilized milk is also there. Then in the apiary sector, of course, we have standard for honey. In fact, everything and anything that you can think of relating to food and agriculture, standards are either there. If the standards are quite old, then they have been revised or they are being revised, or maybe some of the newer products may require new standards now. Similarly, you can see in the oil and the oil seeds, you can see that standards for different kind of oils, the refined oils and etc., solvent extracted oils. Then you have the now coming to the cattle feed also. So in fact, cattle feed has also now been made mandatory. So any compounded cattle feed, if it has to be sold, it has to carry the BIS certification mark. So even the mineral mixtures, which are used for supplementing the cattle feeds, then poultry feeds, then even pet foods for dogs and cats. This has been revised in 2019. Then there's a major problem, of high aflatoxin in these cattle feeds, because of the way they are stored. So we have fixed limits for aflatoxin in cattle feeds, and also we have made a standard, which is a guide to the industry to how they can reduce this, how they can prevent this aflatoxin in the various raw materials which are used for cattle feed. So this is IS 17818 2022. It has been recently published. Then, even we have standardized the tobacco products also. And here also we are very active at the international level, and at ISO level also we are helping in making standards in this area. And similarly, we have standards on alcoholic drinks. So apart from all these kind of standards, as I had said, we not only make standards for products, there are standards also for storage of agricultural produce. So you can see that, like how the onions have to be stored. So there is a guide which is given. So these are all codes of practice. These are like codes of practice. For good storage practices or good transport practices, or even sometimes the constructional requirements are given, of a food grain warehouse. So you could see so many different kind of standards are there. Then the food grains have to be fumigation has to be done. So the different kind of fumigants that have to be used, how they have to be sprayed, how they have to be stored. So all the codes of practice are also there as standards. Then we have standards on fisheries, on aquaculture also, various good aquaculture practices, on frozen, fresh and canned fishes. And similarly, as we have for fish, we also have for the meat and the poultry sector, also various kind of meat-based products and also egg. Then comes, your horizontal standards. Horizontal standards are basically food safety systems which are applicable across the food chain. So it may apply to the dairy, it may apply to meat, it may apply to fruit and vegetable. So also standards, HACCP, I'm sure you must have all studied in your college. So IS 15000 is there, which is a HACCP standard, which is based on the Codex standard. And then you have ISO 22000, which is your FSMS. So that is again an ISO standard which we have adopted. Then in terms of agricultural inputs also, so you'll have standards on pesticides. You'll also have standards on the test methods for analysis of the residues of these pesticides in food, whether in food or in water also. So this is just so that you have an idea. Then relation to some of the work, which we have started for the past, you could say 3-4 years. We started with Ayush, as I had said, which is basically we started with the Ayurveda work. Now we have, in fact, yesterday was the International Yoga Day. And BIS also has now published recently 2 standards on yoga also. This is not part of my presentation. One is the yoga mat, which is cotton yoga mat that has recently come out. And then also in yoga terminology, some of the common yoga terminologies that are used. So we are now involved in making standards in the traditional medicines also, Ayurveda. So this we have just started, and these are some of the standards which we have recently, these have recently come out. And then you also have standards on water. See, we have standards on water as such for drinking. Then also on the purification systems, that means on the machineries. So you will have a water purifier with ultraviolet, the UV based. Then we also have standard on reverse osmosis, which is the RO based point of use. This is which is applicable for domestic RO based water purifiers. Then we have standards on various kind of fertilizers which are used. Then also standards on the good agricultural practices. This is includes your organic production systems also, where you are not using any chemical fertilizers or pesticides. So mostly biopesticides, microbial pesticides, biofertilizers, etc. So this standard also exists. Similarly, you have standards for various micro irrigation emitting pipes and etc. So you'll have on irrigation. Then also on the crop protection equipment, the various sprayers, which are used for spraying of various pesticides. So standards are there on the equipment. Similarly, for farm machinery, agricultural tractors and various codes relating to that. Then once a crop, then you'll also have standards on milling, standards on post harvest. So this will be our post harvest machineries. So this is just for your information, as I had said that BIS is also a member of ISO. So in ISO also the work of international standards is through committees. So you can see, that each of our, if you look at the second column, these are our committees, the FAD committees. So we do have a liaison, with the ISO committees also. So we participate, in their work and we contribute to international standardization. This is just for your, I think, so that you are aware that we are also working with the ISO standards. And this I think I've already covered that BIS, since 1960s is also holding the ISO Secretariat for the Spices Committee. And we have published 73 ISO standards and currently 5 standards are under development. So I think this was all relating to standards, but just for you, as I think I had already told about water, I'll just go back. This standard, is a standard which is 14543 and 13428. These are under mandatory certification. So what it means is that we have a standardization department. I may like to just maybe stop sharing now. So we have a standardization department, which is here. It is based in Delhi, which is headquartered. But we have our branch offices in all states. So what they do is that any manufacturer, if they are desiring of applying for BIS license or BIS certification, so if a standard on the subject exists, supposing you have a manufacturer who has a packaged water industry. So they want to apply to BIS. They will anyway have to apply because it is under mandatory. So they apply to BIS for certification that they want a license. Then our officer will go there and will visit that premises of that factory and will see, that each step whether they are following the standard, that is IS 14543 in the case of water, and the hygiene practices are being followed, and the all the additives or anything, the treatments that they are doing, whether it is as per the Indian standards. And then they will also pick up a sample of the product and they will get it tested by a BIS lab itself. BIS also has its own laboratories, or it can also send it to BIS recognized labs. So based on that, then it can give them a license. And then there is a surveillance which is carried out, which are surprise inspections which are done every year. And then based on that, their certification can be renewed, for a period of 1 year or 2 years based on what they apply for. So that is how our certification works. So certification is there in all our this thing. In all the states we have branch offices, whereas standard development is confined to the headquarters. So I think that is all I wanted to say. I also wanted to give you an idea what certification is. But maybe if you want a session on certification, I think I may not be the correct person. We have our certification marks department. They would be better able to maybe speak only on the. But what is important is that certification that BIS does is only against standards. So if Indian standard exists on the subject, then they can carry out a certification to check whether the product is conforming to that relevant Indian standard. So I think that is all from my side.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And students, we are open for question answer round. If you have some doubts or questions, you can drop it in chat box or unmute yourself and ask the questions. Ma'am, we got our first question. Uh, it's from Shubham, and he asked, "Can you give some brief idea of SNAP and hassle?" Ma'am, you are mute.
Yeah. Okay, okay. Well, I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, there are two different things. So what I'll start, I can just maybe start with HACCP because I think that's more relevant to the students here. HACCP is hazard analysis and critical control point. It is a tool, to ensure that the product that is being made is in accordance with the various food safety practices and principles to ensure that the product that is produced is safe to consume. And it is a codex, it is an internationally accepted tool. And maybe if in detail for that, how it is implemented by the industry, I think there have to be a separate session for that. But that is different. Now regarding SNAP, I'm not too sure because I did not touch SNAP here. But it's interesting that that question is there. SNAP is actually Standards National Action Plan. And this, in fact, BIS had made this SNAP, to give a kind of a vision, to for the various division councils and committees of BIS. That is what they would like to focus on. So it was a 3-year plan. It started in 2019, and the first SNAP is now ending in 2022. And at BIS now we have now started the work for preparation of the next SNAP. So this NAP basically gives, of the new subjects that should be taken up for standardization, and also the how we should improve our engagement with stakeholders, standard promotion, how we can involve, more experts in our committees. So this, it is basically to make our systems more efficient and effective. So that is the meaning of SNAP, Standards National Action Plan. So it is at the country level. Yeah. Any other question?
I think, ma'am, we don't have any other questions.
No question from anybody. I don't know whether they have understood or it has kind of gone a little.
Any other questions, students?
It doesn't seem so.
So, so thank you so much, ma'am, for such informative and enlightening session. And on the food and ma'am, we got in another question, I think. Can you give us an idea on CIP system? CIP.
CIP is actually cleaning in place. Yeah. No, CIP system is used basically. It's a, what should I say? It's an alternative to manual cleaning, which is done by the industry. It is like, for cleaning of various equipments, and maybe the piping systems in the factories. Like now, we are all having automatic systems. Either you have, supposing you have a bottling plant, a milk bottling plant, or you'll have, I'm just giving you an example of, you have an industry, like any dairy industry, or maybe any fruit juice unit. So they'll have a unit for heating, and then kind of pasteurizing that juice, and then cooling it, then packing it, then filling it. So all the machineries which are used, in that, in terms of the pasteurizer which is used, in terms of the centrifuger if it is there, in terms of the if it is being done through a HTST kind of a pasteurizer, and then cooling unit, and then storing it, and then finally filling and a bottling unit. So all those machineries have to be cleaned. So what they do is, the industry now does it, since it is all now automated and it is PLC based. So they have a cleaning in place system, wherein, whatever is their cleaning program, in terms of the kind of whether it's a caustic soda based cleaning, or it's some other based cleaning, or it is being run through the PLC thing. So it's a automatic cleaning of the entire machinery which is there, and there is no manual cleaning of all those, which is not possible also. So that is what is called as a CIP system, cleaning in place. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing such information. Again, I thank you so much for giving such enlightening and informative presentation on food and agriculture standardization and certification process. I am sure that the students were not very much aware of such important information, but I owe you special vote of thanks for sharing such crucial information about standardization process. Now, I would request Abhishek sir and Anand sir from IRCTC to share a few words with us. Over to you, Abhishek sir and Anand sir.
I hope Anand sir is there. I think I can see him, but so I would, ma'am, thank you so much for this, enlightening session. I was there throughout. I was doing a little bit of my work, but still I was there throughout. It was really, really very, very informative, and I think students getting this kind of an exposure from BIS, correspondent themselves is going to be a huge benefit for them, and probably they can take a lot from here. Anand sir, if you are there. I think he must be. He's there, but I don't know whether he's switched it off or something. Probably, I would just, ma'am, thank you so much for this session. We are thankful to you again that you have been kind enough to come on platforms. What we create for these students and our seed programs. And thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Pratishtha.
thank you, thank you.
Please,
Can I just add on one thing?
yeah, ma'am. Please.
I forgot to mention, that all our Indian standards now, indigenous standards, they're all available for free download also. So
All
what
right.
I
All
can
right.
do is that I can maybe request the students, if they visit our website,
Right.
it is standards. What I'll do, I'll just maybe mention in the chat box. They'll have to only register themselves, and then, standards.in it is, and then they would be able to access. I mean, they'll have to register themselves, and then they can not I'm sorry, it is not standards, it is, I think you should go to, wait, www.manak online dot, or this one, or it's standardsbis.in. It will go through the same platform. So once you go here, then you, after registering yourself, then you will be able to access the standards also. So maybe, by typing a keyword, etc., and then you'll be able to get the correct
Probably
standard.
they'll be able to understand in their field. They can just take
Yes,
out
yes,
yes, ma'am. That,
yes.
that that's going to be really,
Yeah,
really
that can be
helpful.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So much, ma'am.
So,
Again,
thank you. Yeah,
for
thank you,
taking some
Pratishtha.
time and
Yeah.
addressing this.
Sir is there now. I think Mr. Anand Shah is
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Sir, good
Anand
evening.
sir,
Sir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. क्या बोलूं? In fact, I was there present for the whole of session. It was quite informative, ma'am. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate Sattvic Council of India for giving this internship program to all the participants, जो भी यहाँ पे student हैं, जो भी हैं. और आई एम रियली थैंकफुल कि जो पूल इन कर रहे हैं आप रिसोर्स पर्सन्स यहाँ पर, जो रिसोर्स पर्सन्स यहाँ पे आकर के अपना लेक्चर या जो नॉलेज जो दे रहे हैं, जो डिलीवर कर रहे हैं, ये एक नॉलेज डिसिपेशन का एक सेंटर भी बनता जा रहा है. सो दैट इज रियली अप्रिसिएबल. पिछले पिछले सेशन में भी मैंने एक छोटा सा वो एक पता नहीं कौन सा श्लोक मैंने बोला था, शायद वो विद्या ददाति विनयम वाला. तो होता क्या है ना मैम कि अभी आई वाज देयर इन अ पूजा, घर में कुछ पूजा हो रही थी. तो वहां पे मैंने जो पंडित से ऐसे ही ज्ञान का कुछ बातचीत हो रहा था, राइट. सिंस इट इज सात्विक, तो हम लोग सात्विक के बारे में थोड़ा सा चर्चा करेंगे. तो वहां पर पंडित ने एक बहुत अच्छी बात कही कि फिजिक्स, केमिस्ट्री, बायोलॉजी, मैथ्स, ये सारी चीजें पढ़ करके कोई आदमी नौकरी तो कर सकता है, उसको अच्छी नौकरी जरूर मिल जाएगी, लेकिन ज्ञानवर्धन नहीं होता. मतलब जो विजडम होता है, जो बुद्धि होती है, वो नहीं बढ़ता, राइट. तो मैंने कहा कि अरे भाई, ज्ञानवर्धन अगर नहीं होता है तो फिर कैसे वो आदमी नौकरी कर लेता है. तो उन्होंने वही एक संस्कृत का श्लोक सुनाया था, और वो श्लोक जो था दैट वाज विद्या ददाति विनयम विनयात याति पात्रताम पात्रत्वात् धनमाप्नोति जतो धनम ततो सुखम. तो विद्या से विनयशीलता आती है, विनय, हम्बलनेस. इट गिव्स यू द हम्बलनेस, इट गिव्स यू द विजडम, एंड फर्दर दिस पर्टिकुलर हम्बलनेस एंड विजडम मेक्स यू एलिजिबल. विनयात याति पात्रताम, यही विनयशीलता जो है वो आपको पात्रता देती है, वो आपको एलिजिबल बनाती है. ठीक है. तो ये मोर और लेस वही चीज है, और यही जो है ना वो बेसिकली सात्विक ज्ञान है. आपने जो भी अभी दिया उसमें सारे जितने भी उसके उसके सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स, प्रपोजल्स, वो सारी सारी चीजें आई 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 सॉ इट. तो ये सारी चीजें जो है वो टेक्निकली इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, लेकिन वो जो आदमी के अंदर जो उस चीज को एक्सेप्ट करने का जो ये है ना, वो भी एट द सेम टाइम आना चाहिए. एंड आई बिलीव दैट ऑल ऑफ अस हियर जो यहाँ पे जो जुड़े हुए हैं, वो उसी उसी एलिजिबिलिटी, उसी चीज से, उसी इंटरेस्ट से जुड़े हुए हैं. हम लोग जुड़े और एक एक चीजों को जो भी हमें जो बताया गया है उस चीज को आत्मसात करें, अपने अंदर अंतर्निहित करें, सो दैट कि हम जो है वो स्वयं वो हो जाएं जो बताना चाह रहे हैं, राइट. वो एकीकृत होना चाहिए, वो एसिमिलेशन होना चाहिए नॉलेज. मैं ज्यादा मतलब मेरी आदत है लेक्चर देने की एक्चुअली. तो
Sir, thank you so
मैं
much.
कभी
Thank you
कभी
so
जो है
much.
वो थोड़ा ज्यादा बोल देता हूँ, बट
No, sir. It
वेरी
has
गुड
been.
नॉलेज इम्पार्टिंग. बहुत ही बढ़िया, बहुत ही सुंदर. थैंक यू
आज
सो
आज
मच.
in fact let me share my आज मुझे भी बहुत सारी चीजें बीआईएस के बारे में पता चली हैं मैम. सीरियसली
यस
आज
सर,
आपने
यस सर, इंडीड इंडीड.
आज
Actually,
आज जो एसिमिलेशन आपने दिया है, नाउ आई कैन डू अ स्मॉल लेक्चर ऑन बीआईएस. आई कैन डू दैट.
very
पहले क्या होता था
good. एक्चुअली जनरली ना टेक्निकल जो पीपल होते हैं उनके एक वीकनेस कहते हैं, मतलब दे आर वेरी बैड इन प्रमोशन. तो हम काम करते हैं लेकिन पता नहीं होता है कि काम क्या हो रहा है, nobody knows. So we
बिल्कुल
also,
बिल्कुल.
now through this web and all, we look forward for these opportunities where we can actually tell,
Yes ma'am.
especially
Yes ma'am.
students, the
Yes.
next generation, so they must know
Now,
about.
that is more that very important. Knowledge transfer is basically what is the objective. Point is that my entire project. I mean, now Satvik is. Let me give you a little brief what we've been. Satvik is now becoming a part of academics. So we are doing tie-ups with universities like Oro in Surat. I was just in Surat. I was in UAE, ma'am. Almost maybe just अभी एक दिन पहले ही वापस आया हूँ. So I was there to enhance the idea of exactly the food certification and सब में गए थे. Point is that कि आज की तारीख में knowledge transfer is such an expensive thing and we want to bring it down, because what is happening is कि एक normal बच्चा जो कुछ करना चाह रहा है, जो कुछ evaluate करना चाह रहा है, उसके पास में मैम एक information के लिए वो इतने पैसे लगते हैं कि ultimately वो die out हो जाता है सारा मामला उसका. एंड सेशंस लाइक दिस आज मैंने देखा, इट इज लाइक अगर पता नहीं मुझे बच्चों ने इसमें से क्या लिया, लेकिन जो मेरी टीम अटैच्ड है सात्विक की, मुझे लगता है उन्होंने बहुत कुछ ले लिया होगा आज, बिकॉज दे टिपिकली बिकॉज इस तरीके का ब्रीफअप मैम हम लोगों को तो मिला नहीं आपसे, क्योंकि हम लोग इनफैक्ट आई मेट यू कपल ऑफ
बहुत
टाइम्स.
सारी तो ऐसी चीजें हैं उसमें सर,
या
जो
यस सर.
कि I have taken the screenshot of the
अच्छा.
PowerPoint presentation, which I
अरे
am
वो
going to further lecture on it to my people.
I will be sending you the presentation.
सर वो मिल जाएगा
That will be,
I
प्रेजेंटेशन,
will
कोई
send it
दिक्कत
that
to
नहीं है
will
you.
be
मैम.
great.
Yes, yes.
ये वो दैट इज
I'm
नॉट अ
sure we
प्रॉब्लम,
can.
बट द पॉइंट इज कि सर बट द बस देखिए क्या है, आज जितने स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो सीट प्रोग्राम कर रहे हैं पर से VFRS, वेजिटेरियन फ्रेंडली रेलवे सर्विसेज. आई ऑलवेज वांट कि BIS का एक पार्ट जरूर जरूर होना चाहिए एकेडमिक के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से, बिकॉज
Yes.
BIS का कोई एकेडमिक सेल नहीं है जहां पर जाकर के स्टूडेंट्स जा सकें, बात कर सकें, इंटरेक्ट कर सकें. अगर होते भी होंगे तो वो एक नॉर्मल लेवल पर नहीं आते, वो एक बीटेक फूड टेक नहीं पहुंचते जो थर्ड ईयर फोर्थ ईयर का होता है.
नहीं, at
मैम
least
मैम
हमारे लेवल
सीरियसली
पर तो
मैम
नहीं आते
वी
हैं.
रियली वांट टू डू एन एंटायर प्रोग्राम ऑन BIS. मैं सोच रहा हूँ एक एक पूरा क्लीशे करूं विच शुड बी फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट, कि कोई भी बच्चा उसमें आकर के कम से कम स्टैंडर्ड्स और स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन के बारे में सीखे, तो एटलीस्ट टेक्निकल नॉलेज तो, बेसिक टेक्निकल नॉलेज तो मैम होनी चाहिए
होनी
एक
चाहिए.
बंदे को,
That's right.
कि मतलब अगर वो एक फील्ड में है, बीटेक कर रहा है या फूड टेक या बीटेक किसी भी रिजीम में बीटेक कर रहा है, वो मुझे लगता है उसको BIS के बारे में नॉलेज होनी चाहिए. सर आप क्या कहते हैं?
सही कह रहे हैं.
नहीं, बिल्कुल सही, बिल्कुल सही.
ये अभी हम काफी
लाइक
कर रहे हैं एक्चुअली. वी आर डूइंग सम मेकिंग दी स्टैंडर्ड क्लब्स इन वेरियस इंजीनियरिंग एंड अदर कॉलेजेस,
राइट
प्रोफेशनल.
मैम,
वी आर
राइट.
स्टार्टिंग दैट आउट. It is being done. So I'm sure that
मैं एक औरो
next
यूनिवर्सिटी
year
का मैं
you'll be
आपको
able
देता
to.
हूँ अभी. वी हैव रिसेंटली डन एन MOU विद देम. तो
अच्छा.
प्रतिष्ठा इज गोइंग टू सेंड यू एन प्रपोजल. औरो यूनिवर्सिटी सूरत में है मैम, गुजरात, जहां पर
Okay.
गुजरात इज अ हब ऑफ इंटायर, दे हैव गॉट द मैक्सिमम नंबर ऑफ फूड पार्क्स. सो वी
Okay.
आर नाउ ऑपरेटिंग, हमने अभी रिसेंटली वी हैव स्टार्टेड आवर ऑपरेशंस इन गुजरात. सो वहां पर मुझे लगता है कि एक BIS का सेल औरो में जरूर होना चाहिए, बिकॉज औरो इज वेरी वेरी एग्रेसिव. सो एक बार मैं
Please, please.
we'll
And
connect
I
on
think
that
we are
later.
already working on
And
that, making that standard also.
yes
That
ma'am, yes ma'am.
vegetarian this thing. And I'm
I'm
sure
also
that
I'm
you'll be.
also
I think
I'm
that will
also
be
very
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 good that
eager.
if we are able to come out, huh?
Satvik is very very eagerly waiting for that
No,
standard, sir.
we are. I'm sure that you'll be able to hear from us very soon on that.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, ma'am.
And
Thank you so
that
much,
is
and
Thank
thank you
required.
you.
so much for coming today.
No, no,
It was a
thank
Actually,
real
you.
pleasure to have you
My,
on board, ma'am.
my
Thank you
in
so
pleasure.
much.
fact,
Thank you so much.
we have our base kitchens,
Hmm.
we have our train services, और इसी ट्रेन में है या बेस किचन में है या बहुत सारी ऐसी ट्रेनें हैं जिसमें हम लोगों ने सिर्फ वेजिटेरियन सर्विसेज के अलाउ किया हुआ है.
Vegetarian.
लाइक वंदे भारत इज देयर, एंड बनारस वाली जो ट्रेन है, वंदे भारत जो बनारस चलती है या जम्मू के लिए जो
जी
चलती
सर.
है, इन दोनों ट्रेनों को हम लोगों ने वेजिटेरियन भी कंप्लीटली ये किया हुआ है. बट द फूड इज एक्चुअली कमिंग फ्रॉम द सेम किचन ना,
Yes.
नॉनवेज कुकिंग हो रही है. तो उसका
बिल्कुल सर.
स्टैंडर्ड क्या हो एंड व्हाट आर द प्रोसीजर्स टू बी
Separation
फॉलोड
कैसे
टू
रहना?
इंश्योर.
That's right. नहीं वही, I think we are going to make on that only now. Yeah.
Yes ma'am,
I'm
yes
sure
ma'am,
that can
that is
be
really
referred
required.
and used, widely.
That is really
And
required.
I think we'll involve IRCTC also once we make
Oh,
that.
that would be great.
That
That
would
would be
be
great.
great. Yeah. That.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Okay.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am.
you very
Thank you
much.
so
No,
much for
no,
coming.
my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, sir, for coming today.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. I call this session close now. You may all leave. Good evening, everyone. I, Pratishtha Vasti, on behalf of Sattvic Council of India, welcome you all to the second session of today's webinar series. For today's session, we are joined by Dr. Kaushik Sengupta. He's the head of food business SAR in Bureau Veritas. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for taking such crucial time in your busy calendar. Now, I request you to kindly share Over to you, sir, for the sharing the presentation now.
Okay, thank you, Pratishtha. Thank you for the invitation for this webinar. And welcome all of the participants who has joined in this webinar. I'm sharing my presentation. Pratishtha, maybe somebody can confirm me if you can able to see my slides. Can you confirm? Hello?
Sir, it's visible, sir.
It's visible, right?
Right.
Okay. So, thanks all the participants who have joined in this call. So, I think I have near about how much 40-45 minutes, Pratishtha, or
Yes, sir.
how much time I have for this presentation?
Sir, 1 hour, 5:30.
1 hour. So probably 5:30. I'll take 1 hour exactly for completing this webinar, and maybe we can have a small discussion if at all you have anything further to understand some of the requirement or something if you have some questions on your mind. So.
Sure.
Today I'm going to take a small session on the subject called Global Supply Chain Needs and Expectation, which is based on Food Safety Management System. In short, we call it as FSMS. So most of you are already aware that supply chain is one of the most complex requirement globally, and especially when it is with the food safety or food requirement or food supply chain, this is much more complex. Uh, uh, Having said that, the food safety ecosystem is in the supply chain program. It is not just. I mean, the first slide. I'm just try to give you some small, the background before we just go and see further the information. When we are talking about the food safety ecosystem, basically the food safety, the first thing that we know about the food safety, which is one of the important requirement in order to ensure that whether all the safety aspects, all the legal aspects are all meeting as per the intended use of the product, whether the consumers are aware, whether the requirements has been defined adequately, having all the parameters on all different hazards are free from these products, and it can be consumed as per the requirement which is defined by the manufacturer or the seller of the products. Again, the quality aspect is also important. One more important element, which is I would not say recently introduced, rather it has been there for a long time, but nowadays it's become a lot of noise to all consumers as well as to all the supply chain personnel, which is more about the sustainability requirement. So food safety, quality, and sustainability are becoming common subjects nowadays. The reason because the transparency and traceability are important in the global supply chain, because if you are paying for certain products, that means you want to know what am I consuming, if I'm whether it is benefit for my health, whether it is meeting my requirement. I have certain restrictions whether this is something that been taken care in this product. So at the same time, from where it is coming, it may be certain ethical or something which you should know about the traceability requirements with respect to origin of the products, from where it is coming, in the supply. So these all aspects are very crucial nowadays as far as the food safety ecosystem is concerned. So it's, as I said, it's a very complex process. This may be a very simple process. Probably it may be sometimes be much more complex in what we can see, because there may be uh, different type of intermediate suppliers which may be involved uh, in the supply chain, and there may be you know materials which are coming from some unknown sources, or maybe suppliers may not have a track from where and from how many traders it is been coming, and the way that the product has been stored and been sold and packed or manufactured. Sometimes, to certain extent, the manufacturers may have information, but the to the extent that the manufacturer have the information, probably when we see the downward or rather the downstream process to the consumers, it becomes the visibility become much more less. Things are not really captured. That's one of the reasons that most of the big brands nowadays are now become very cautious, and now they want to promote the products uh, with those type of information as well, because there is a demand from the consumers that yes, we require a product which is free of, for example, lactose, because there is a niche or some of the manufacturer who demands those type of products, or maybe free of certain allergens, or maybe free of from certain glutens, or maybe having certain added in quality nutritional benefits which has been there, or certain claims, whatever it is. So that information, the same time, if I'm paying a premium for a product, I must get a product which is free from any toxins, or maybe inorganic in nature, or whatever be the situation. At the same time, uh, it's also the right of the consumer that they should get those informations. If I'm paying a product which is a vegetarian, for example, and something is added in the product which may be derived out of some non-vegetarian ingredients or animal origin, in many way. It can be from the preservatives, it may be from the some of the chemicals, it may be some of the storage places where the product or some of the raw material be stored, and which has been found to be mixed up during the process. So anything. So that's also one of the the thing that may impact the supply chain, brand reputation as well. And if something that goes wrong to the consumer. Uh, there are many standards globally which are very popular. One of them is, of course, if many of you may be knowing, is Global Food Safety Initiatives has got its many standards which has been approved by them. One of them is Food Safety Management System, or Food Safety Standard Certification, FSSC, BRC, IFS. This all are GFSI compliance, and time to time GFSI is also looking for many changes with respect to standard, with respect to their requirement, their even the curriculum. When they look into the supplier management system, the requirement, important elements which need to be added, need to be addressed in order to ensure that adds some more value with respect to the products or the consumers. Um, One more important point which I just want to make it here is that ethics is also, to some extent, it is now back as one of the structuring value in the society. So it was somewhere got disappeared because of certain reason. Ethics was not be present because more of the most of the time the manufacturers or the supply chain companies, they are going to looking for the benefit of profit. For the last 50 years, I would say, they are looking for more and more production, more and more quality oriented, but somewhere ethics is also become a little silent. So that's also one of the important element in the supply chain in the coming years. The reason, because you may be aware that there are many food safety uh, issues with respect to the product recalled, product have been found to be sent back, many consignments, and at the same time, global initiative to reduce the carbon footprint. India has also taken a pledge of reducing the carbon footprint in the next 70 years. So, as an initiative by the government of India, Prime Minister, that we should also be a carbon neutral country by in next 70 years. So probably that's maybe to 2070. That means by 20 next 50 years, in fact. So that's one of the ambition. And I know it's very difficult, but that's something which is the driving force for all this process. All the manufacturer, all the companies are also looking forward for all different initiatives in order to ensure those process. What are the different complexities in the supply chain? One of the important is increasing the product proliferation as a form of the mass communication, because there is a complexities with respect to the uh, agriculture use, and then uh, products being used from agriculture sources. It is coming to the warehouses. Then there are a lot of intermediate products being kept, and then it is finally going to some warehouses, and then from there to some manufacturing units, and then from the packing units. And so complexity is something which is very high now. Uh, uh, Consumer demands are growing. Of course, increase in the demand with population and all, as well as the requirement, health, safety is also important element. That something is also one of the element in the satisfying the condition. And the next is the influence with respect to the consumers' behavior, or the local community demands. Uh, Probably, if you want to export a product, you also ensure that the regulation or that condition of that exporting country is also being followed. So, irrespective of whatever be your regulation, you also have to meet the regulation or the requirement of that country, not just a buyer, not just a store, but also the country specific requirements. So that's all of the different combination of the complexities which brings to the global supply chain change. That is the driving force behind this. And in fact, the need for a transparent supply chain process is important. Reason behind that is that almost 65% of the consumers are willing to pay uh, more for the companies committed to the sustainability. If you are committed to sustainable products, I think 65% almost are willing to pay. If you are very clear about type of, because nowadays they become very, very aware because of different electronic communications and all those e-commerce and all. So that's one of the vital factor. And 35% of the consumers trust industry prepared foods, and there is a growing uh, trust labels, and somewhere large food companies are also trying to figure it out how to be with that, get that type of confidence, going into that 65%, that pie. So I think to some extent that is there are some information, something which is been missing. Of course, probably there are many supply chain or maybe small companies we may not be able to uh, maybe afford to have such kind of infrastructure and technology to have a very transparent supply chain or the requirement. if I can just recollect certain requirement that the traditional requirement, traditional way of going for a consumer, understanding a consumer needs and expectation is that uh, first is to get a feedback. Normally, that's way of getting a information, that sending a feedback to the consumers, asking different type of questions, and maybe getting some idea that yes, this is their likes, this is the dislikes, and then based on that making a customized product. New technology is different nowadays. The new technology demanding data oriented. Now there are a lot of data analysis which is happening in the food supply chain, because there are a lot of IoT and blockchain management system and blockchain oriented system which is also implemented throughout the supply chain, and that is something has a radical change in the process, because that gives more technology that will give the future oriented requirement for the supply chain, and that's something is what the companies are looking for, to that product probably to some extent become little more costly, but yes, it benefits to the consumer as well. So that's the same sort of information. As I said, fraud are going high. Fraud in case of not just food safety fraud or food related fraud. There are a lot of financial fraud as well. Financial fraud sometimes uh, it's very difficult to detect. That is also happening in the supply chain, especially food. So consumer brands which are associated, that sometimes has to pay a very huge cost, for those type of frauds. Surveys have been conducted, and there has been a lot of issues that has happened with respect to identifying those informations with respect to. But I think to some extent, more and more information that are coming uh, from the global perspective, very little from the Indian perspective, because that is also important, because India as a whole is very big in terms of the consumers, in terms of the consumption pattern as well. So very big market. So that somewhere lacking the uh, type of study that is been done in India, and that need to be done in order to understand the real market of India, real type of consumers need and expectation, and that will actually give consumers much more benefit. So I just now moving towards a little more technical. Why supply chain is important, especially on the food safety system. Now, when we are talking about supply chain, the first thing is where we can able to identify those gaps. That's more important. The gaps, does it actually address in supply chain, and if at all, is there any system to identify? Is there any process? Is there any standard or management system requirement to address those requirements? Yes, it is there. There are many technical standards. There are many requirements. One of the very popular one is ISO 22000. 2018 is the version, the new version. When it is the second version has come. The first version is 2005. Now this 2018 is active, and this is about the food safety management system for all food supply chain. If you are anywhere in the supply chain of food, then this standard is applicable. Whether you are manufacturing or supplying, you are into that logistics or whatever be the kind of supply chain role that you have. So the mother of all standard, which is ISO 9001, which specifically deals with the quality management system, and which is more about the quality aspect and more about the customers, whereas the ISO 22000 address more about the consumer perspectives. So because this is more about the way that it should be consumed, the product will be consumed. So why it is more important? Because there are many new elements which has been added in this standard. One of the important is the high level structure, which has a PDCA approach, It has largely based on the risk-based approach with different type of parameters, right from the organizational approach as well as the operational approach. So when I say the organizational approach, that means it has organization specific criteria, right from identifying the scope or the context to the organization, how the organization is operating, what are its objective, present, future objective, and what the organization wants to be there in next down the line, and what are the different way of how they communicate throughout the supply chain. Right from the manufacturer, if it's a manufacturing company, otherwise depends on the scope or the business pattern, how they optimize their resources. Now that's very important because there is where the supply chain comes in picture. The important factor is how better you can utilize your resources in order to the optimal resource optimal utilization. That's a vital keyword, so that properly you will get the right extract out of it, and then you can use it properly in the benefit of the products and the consumers. Improvement functions, uh, 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 improvement functions like performance measuring objectives, and you have the verification processes, like right from the accountability of the leadership or the management of that organization. It's setting up the objectives, it's setting up the policies, right from the beginning, as well as the continual process of verification process throughout the chain, so as to ensure that all the factors are properly reviewed, all the requirements are reviewed. So that there somewhere there is a leadership authority and responsibility which is defined in the standard. Uh, Supply chain is not just a small aspect. It's a very vital aspect in this program, because everywhere the supply chain is linked in this management system, right from the raw materials from where it is coming to the process and the final dispatch. So one of the first requirement is where you are actually purchasing the raw material, from where you are purchasing, and how the way that is your purchase pattern happening. So there are many aspects which is there in this food safety management system, which is all defined. If many of you know about the standard, probably if you can go through it, there are certain requirement with respect to some clauses, which is defined largely on the clause. Um, uh, uh, of course, the clause 6 is more important. Clause 6 where it defines 6.1, 6.2, which is more about the risk management system approach, the way that you identify the risks, the interested parties, and risks and opportunity. But that they are also the suppliers risks also been involved. Then context to the organization, the clause 4, which is more about largely on the way that the need and expectation has been defined in the standard, and with respect to the suppliers or the vendors process or the approval process, does it covers all the requirement that has been whether it been reviewed properly. Those are all systems which are all defined in the as a part of the management system approach in ISO 22000. Um, if you move into the next clauses, which is more about the operational requirement, mainly that covers in clause number 8, where it defined the way of product manufacturing process, food supply chain process, what is the more efficient way of identifying the hazards, the prerequisite programs. Of course, prerequisite programs, when you say supplier control, is one of the important elements, supply chain management. The different suppliers criteria, approval process, quality parameter, so that are identified in order to taken on board the suppliers or the materials from the suppliers, and way that it should be rejected, both. So that is also important. And moreover, the codex elementary is the HACCP, based on the HACCP principle, which is also in clause 8, where it defined the 7 principle of the HACCP system, where the criteria which is established right from the setting of the team, as well as the evaluation criteria and the setting up the manufacturing critical control points and critical limits, and finally the records, and that loop should go on. Okay, it's a cycling process. So that's something which is there in the entire management system approach in ISO 22000 2018 version. There are many ISO standard ISO in the family. 22000 is the generic management systems standard. There are also some prerequisites called ISO TS 20002 Part 1, which is more about the prerequisite for the food manufacturing, where there is a specific clause, specific requirement for the suppliers system, and the way that the supplier should be approved, the purchase process. It also speaks about the criteria defined on in case of any emergency purchase. So there is also a new requirement which is added recently in case of the business continuity. In case of the business continuity, if the suppliers wants to, if the organization wants to continue the business, I mean, we are dependent on the supplier. But what if the supplier has some limited, raw material, or the raw materials are not available? What is the strategic plan for the organization? Do they stop doing business, or they will continue by approving some alternate supplier or alternate process? So in case of such emergency situation, what is the way of doing that? So there is also a specific requirement which is defined in the ISO TS 2002, as well as the FSSC requirement. There is also a catering standard for the catering, PRP for the catering manufacturer. There is also for the farming, as well as the packaging manufacturers. Packaging also, to a large extent depend on the supply chain, because there are many raw materials, right from the resins to the different varnishes to solvents to inks to other different other raw materials. The raw material from the different type of vendors, and I think that there is also a critical aspect, because when we talk about the sustainable function, a sustainable system, that to some extent, we are talking about the renewable energy, renewable process of manufacturing. So we need to see that alternate source of packaging nowadays, more oriented towards plastic free, or maybe single use plastics should be banned, or using more recycled plastics and all those things. Paper, but paper is also you cannot use the virgin paper, rather recycled papers are something which is recommended. So those all things are also comes in a picture when you talk about the requirement of standard 2000. There are some specific criteria when we are talking about the traceability specific to the ISO family, 20000 family. There is standard for 2005, which talks about the food or the feed chain traceability system. That organization, how does they implement this traceability in the organization, and as well as the criteria for the certifying body, that how they will do this audits or do the verification with respect to the traceability system. So there is a standard for 2005 which defines that requirement. Now there are few things which are also important, largely on the capabilities of the organization. Depends on manufacturing processes or manufacturing scopes. Like a very small segment of the companies are actually implemented the ISO 22000 standard. A major one is not certified. So I think to a large extent, this all entire supply chain has to come into that system, including small traders, including supply chain, like transporters and all. Because if you are even if you are dependent on any type of external services like uh, say for example the transport agency, and the transport agency uh, is taking your materials probably from your site to dispatch area or a port or to a customer, then there should be some criteria defined that whether the transport agency is capable of carrying that particular food product, how it is possible, whether their the vehicle probably is clean adequately, it is free from any kind of contaminants that can harm the product, whether your product is free or is capable of protecting that product, our packaging is capable of protecting the product from any external sources. Have you established the critical control points or any prerequisites while accepting the products from your supplier? Now, I don't know if I can give you some a very small example that just come in my mind. If you are taking if a manufacturer, for example, is into the business of ready-to-eat cut fruits, for example, they are just probably a retail store, and they're making just cut fruits. They're selling it in the store, and in that case, probably as a supplier, you are dependent on some of the farmers, and some farmers are selling those fruits to you, and you are taking the fruits, but you are not washing the fruits. You are just cutting it and just peeling it if required, and then you are packing probably in transparent plastic cartons or bags or small packets, and you are you put it in the display. uh, may not be at temperature regulated, and then selling it, or maybe storing it for a long time. So what type of risks it has? So it has many different type of risks. The first one is from where the fruits have been collected from. So there is a chances of contamination right from the farm. Probably if it can be from the soil, it can be from any dirt or physical hazards, as well as the chemical hazards like pesticides, or maybe it can be from any toxins or mycotoxins, or maybe any heavy metals or anything which may be contaminated from the soil to the product, and then probably it may be carried from the farm to the store. So okay, now before that, maybe it may be packed in a cartons or a packaging material. Probably packaging material is also it's not properly new one. Probably it may be used different time, or may not be proper sealed. Or then there may be chances of again contamination from the packaging material to the product. And again, if you are carrying the product through a vehicle may not be having a temperature sensor, so it may be a case that from farm to a long distance, if it is carrying, then that may some of the product may be rotten or may be damaged, or if it is not adequately pelletized, then that may be a problem. So while giving to the your while accepting rather by the retail store to the that material, then there is a possibility that you are just purchasing and you are not cleaning it, and you are just cutting and packing it directly and selling it to the consumer. So there may be again those type of contaminants may come. So whereas there is a possibility that there is a clear instruction giving by the retail store to the uh, the farmer or to the supply chain, that I need the product to be cleaned by chlorine water, or certain certain material, maybe just cold water, whatever it is, but recommended to be a certain ppm of chlorine water, so that it will clean it thoroughly, or maybe ozone water, whatever it is. Certain times, some people are also using ozone water nowadays, to some extent, and then that is my acceptance criteria of the product. If it is not checked properly during the time of incoming material checks, then that may be a possibility that that may be rejected by the customers, or that may be a loss to the company. And again, customers may not prefer that product which is displayed in the store, not in a very good way, not in a temperature refrigerator, where just open or maybe not properly packed. So a proper way of display, that should be in a proper refrigeration, temperature regulated, at least to a temperature the extent of -5 or less. So that may be a condition where the product may be accepted by your consumers. Okay, so there are many factors, to identify, and in the supply chain. So supply chains is not a very small subject. There are many manufacturing steps which are also involved in the supply chain process, as well as the organization's role also, that how to accept or reject the material. So scope and benefit depends on the complexity and size of the organization, how large you are, and also from where you are actually purchasing the material from. As I said in my example, where if you're purchasing from a small farmer or you are purchasing from a trader, then there should be a proper way of communication. And most vital thing, please go to the site and verify. So vendor audit is one of the important step. Go to the site and check, if required, do a surprise check to see that yes, my product is coming genuinely from and has been authorized or has been instructed to the supplier. So this is the way of doing or accepting a product as per the ISO 22000 requirement. So this is the way of the material supply chain, how it moves right from the manufacturing to right from the farming to the steps where the product will be manufactured. Then you have certain waste management, where waste management goes from the material manufacturing, but still the product move to the transporters. Again, it may be to the retail stores and retail stores to the consumers. So that's how it moves. But everywhere throughout the supply chain, uh, there must be a proper way of monitoring. Nowadays, many companies uh, are having a proper software-oriented tagging system, where the movement can be tracked, and right from the material when it is been harvested or been cleaned, or maybe been provided from the farm to the store, so that there is a proper tag which is coming from the farm throughout the supply chain till it reaches to the consumer. So every step there is a time stamping which is happening, and then only that will be finally been accepted. So there are certain organizations who are following, but this, as I said, probably to a large extent, it's not really uh, but then capability is one of the important, because that requires a lot of cost, a lot of resources and all. So that need to be figure out how companies can able to do it in their system. So I just want to brief you. I still have, I think, some 15 minutes quickly to explain you how the planning stage happened, right from the ISO 2000 requirement. It starts with the addressing the risks and opportunities as far as the FSMS is concerned. Uh, Identifying what are your risks, the risks with respect to, as I said, the suppliers risks, the type of raw materials, type of contaminants, that you also need to identify, is there any historical risk if it happens. It may not be a case where the product been found a risk in your company. Probably there is a chance, there is a possibility that the risk may happen from some it has occurred previously in some other company or some other places, but still that may also pose a risk to some extent in your process as well. So historical risks as well as the identify or different type of hazards. The legal requirements are also very vital as far as India is the FPO's requirements are concerned. They have to meet the requirement of FSSAI Schedule 4 requirements, and all the manufacturing sites need to be audited from an independent body as per the Schedule 4 requirement. That's a legal requirement. If you have a license, you have to be get audited. But the voluntary certification, which is also ISO 22000, but doesn't suffice the requirement of ISO with the legal requirement of FSSAI. These two are mandatory. FSSAI is mandatory. The organization also need to address the risks as well as opportunity, because sometimes the risks also give you some of the opportunities. You know, probably in terms of identifying some new market, new customers, some and a new chain, new product. So maybe that also comes in the process or in the phase of the planning. Now, planning stage is defined based on type of objectives that has been established by the organization. So all objectives should be a SMART objective. So it should be consistent with the policy. It should be measurable. It should be considered as per the requirement of the standard. It should be monitored as well as communicated throughout the organization, right from the top to the bottom. So everyone should be and many times we during the time of audit or during the time of verification, there is a display that we always verify that it has been signed or this policy has been signed adequately, when date, what is the date of the signing, and what is the authorized personnel who has signed the document, so that it matches with the requirement of the recent policy which is there in the documents or the manuals. Those all things must be properly communicated. And there are many ways of doing those type of communication. It can be through some verbal communication, it can be through trainings, it can be through some display, notice boards, whatever. I mean that they find it the most suitable way of doing it. Next is important is the operational requirement. Operational requirement where the organization has to plan or implement or control or maintain or update the requirements. That means the requirements to ensure that that product is safe and it is free from any kind of risk. So all those challenges, right from raw materials previously, which has been identified in the planning phase and the operational phase, we have to ensure that is all risks uh, uh, will be minimized to a certain extent, or maybe reduced or eliminated. So how can you do that? You can do it by different type of manufacturing processes, establishing different control points, different criteria, different adding different chemicals, preservatives, whatever the way, but it should not harm to the consumer. So adding those type of criteria should not harm the product to some extent as per the requirement established by FSSA or the legal authority, that how much of preservative can be added, how much of cooking it should be there. The product integrity should not be changed. So those all things are important in establishing the requirement. Then the suppliers or the prerequisite programs are also need to be established, as I just mentioned in my previous documents, established and implemented. That means a supervision is also important. It's just not just a paper document, rather it's more about going phase wise, each and every areas, a proper GMP audit, a thorough audit that will ensure that all the criterias, all the risks are eliminated, all waste management system are properly in place. This has been discarded appropriately from the system. No mixing happening. All the type of warehouses and storage units wherever the product has been stored, not for a prolonged time. It has been properly palletized. There is no contamination with the product which is on hold or quarantined with the product which is already approved. So in case of any product which has been found to be not complying with the requirement or the recalled back, so there should be a proper way of storage. Chemicals and all those products should be properly in a segregated area, not to be mixed up. So these all things are very important while defining the requirement of the prerequisites of the standard requirement as well as the regulations. So again, coming back to the traceability system is something which will uniquely identify the incoming material from the supplier and throughout the distribution channels. So that means implementation of the traceability will tell you that yes, I have received a lot, so that lot is been tracked, this much of quantity of the material which has been received, and this much of quantity of the material which has been produced, and this is the quantity of the product which has been stored. This is the total type of the raw materials and different ingredients which has been added in the product at certain extent or percentage, and this is the product this is the extent where we have actually done a proper cleaning up or a reflux of the process before we actually taken the product into the system or into the process. uh, and again in case of any kind of rework or any kind of other compliance requirement that also need to be followed. So digital system are also very vital. As you can see the right side of the picture, it is showing somebody is tagging a product. So tagging the product probably will give you certain extent, to some extent, the product like lot number or batch number, the origin of the products, and in case of any declaration like free of allergen, free of certain other benefits, or maybe any other information which may be required for or may be there in the product, so that all things will be captured. A hazard assessment, the last step is of course the hazard assessment. As I said, the elimination of any kind of hazards or reducing to an acceptable limits from the raw material to the finished product. So every step, right from raw material to products to process, consumers, the packaging materials, the physical possession of the products, as well as the legislation. So how can you prevent, eliminate, and reduce it? So different way the manufacturer has to decide based on scientific data, based on the different validation procedure or the qualification procedure, based on the established requirement of the standard, or maybe a predefined requirement, or the same time type of equipment. It depends on the type of equipment while you are manufacturing. It all depends on the quantity of the product that has been taking. It also depends on type of raw materials that from where you are taking. So these all are important while defining the hazards and its control. So while doing a hazard assessment, this is important that you also describe the process, describe the environmental requirement, describe the flow charts right from the raw materials to the in-process materials to the finished products, characteristics of each and every products as per the intended use, and as well as the shelf life of the products. What is the likelihood of occurrence of the products? How does it benefit or adverse to the health? At what dose or what content the products can be consumed? If you are making any ingredient or B2B selling, then to what type of consumers or the customers that you are going to sell those products? What is your packing requirement? What is your labeling requirement? What are the label claims, and what are your allergen requirements? All things must be there in as per the statutory or regulatory requirements of the products, and that should be considered in the hazard step as well. So this is what I was just explaining you. So the operational challenges are all will be there. So there are certain conditions where the hazards and for the products need to be identified. Depends on, of course, the raw materials of the products, but most one of the important is the biological hazard, where different pathogens, different biological factors are essential, need to be considered. Then chemical or radiological hazards, if it is having any type of chemicals or any metals or pesticides and toxins and all that. Physical hazards, maybe uh, uh, coming from the way that we actually receive the materials. Then otherwise, sometimes it also may occur that physical hazards during the time of manufacturing or the process. It can be a metal, it can be from glass, it can be from wood, it can be from anywhere. dirt or anything. So even if it is all products are being safeguarded and it is in a closed equipment, still there is a chances that due to the metal to metal friction, there is a chance of contamination in the products. So these all things are also important that need to be considered, while defining the characteristics and identifying the type of risks with respect to the products and delivery. Yes, so all products are, and finally the labels as per the intended use. So labeling is also important to ensure that the supplier is, or the buyer is aware of how to use the product as per the intended use. So they should know the hazards if the products be consumed, for example, if it is raw or not as per the instruction. So these are some of the way of defining the hazard and identification of the hazard. There is a typical decision tree approach. If you can go through the Codex Alimentarius standard, so this is primarily those descriptions, some questions which has been there, and this will tell you that whether the product is been categorized or identified as prerequisites or an operation prerequisites or a critical control step. So based on that, you can further define it or break it as uh, biological hazards or maybe chemical hazards or physical hazards. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much. I just now request the host or the moderator to open
Thank
for
you
the
so
question
much,
and
sir.
answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for the informative session. Students, now we are open for the question answer round. So you may ask your questions either by dropping in chat box or unmuting yourself. I think, sir, we don't have any questions.
Okay.
Students, any questions? I hope, sir, everything is well understandable to the students. So
Thank you
that is
so
the
much.
reason they are not having some questions.
Thank you so
So I
much.
thank you again, sir, for such enlightening and informative session. And thanking you for taking some crucial time from your busy planner. Now I'll close this session now and thank all the participants to join the session now.